Hello, Dr. Brad. Good morning, or
Me,
it's good afternoon.
not here.
We ran, oh, well, for me, it's afternoon because we had our Q&A this morning, right? Which we call it NLI staff. What was it called? Office hours? Office hours.
Office hours.
Where people submit a bunch of questions, and we had like 13 or 18 or something like questions. And we got through all but about 2 of them, but holy crap. They were good questions, right?
They were. Was that the first one of those staff meetings?
It was our first one, our trial run. It was the only thing that was really weird is that I posted the link in Twitter, and so at the very end we got rated by Andrew Tate fanatics.
Andrew Tate came and bothered us a little bit.
It was hysterical, right? I mean, they probably think they were being rude, but we just thought it was funny because it was actually kind of apropos right at the moment. Anyway, so you talked to me earlier this week about because Brad studies Hebrew, right?
I know, in the most perverse way. It's just
I know, but let's get it. So remember I studied ancient history and specifically ancient art. So I have a lens I look through history, right, as this evolution of art and art as a reflection of the mind, right, of the people in the. So I have this, and so, but it's not a complete view. So Brad goes through, he's talking about Hebrew. He finds really interesting things. Like, a lot of what we do is language, right? I mean, we do a lot of linguistic analysis. So it's natural that Brad would go to this. I find it interesting because Hebrew, like any of the other Semitic languages that are very old, I mean, this whole Mesopotamian Egyptian origin thing. And of course, I have this understanding of Mesopotamian history because I'm keenly aware of their use of spells.
Yes.
Right. And their spells are about demons. They're not like Europeans. European spells are a lot closer to chemistry. Or they're more like chemistry, whereas they bring about changes in the physical world, right?
Yes.
Right. There are wards and things like that, but they're also more like chemistry. Why? Because we're a metallurgical people. Our birth and our origin is from metallurgy, the blacksmith and the demon, which is our first real, aside from the green man, is our first real myth. So Mesopotamians have a very different world. They grew up in a world where there's fucking demons and devils and whatever shit everywhere. And you're trying to keep them at bay. And this is interesting because it illustrates the difference of being in a tribal society where everybody's your enemy and European civilization where everybody's a distant relation. Right. And so our magic is different because we're in a different political environment. So anyway, so I listened to Brad. So Brad comes up with this. Brad says, I'm studying this thing and I had an interesting thing I want to talk to you about. And so hopefully he'll dish it out in the context of what I just explained, because it's actually really profound in that our metaphysical presumptions, those things that we don't realize we use to frame and explain the world, have way more effect on us than we think. So anyway, you were looking up this word, and tell me about it.
So I looked this word up, and I'm hang on, I'm looking it up right now, just so make sure I get the perfectly done. Okay, that I have this translation service that I pay $5 for, and it makes people laugh. So I show it to my patients so that they can see that I did not make this up, that this is coming from an actual website that is a translation. So the Semites all stem from the son of Noah, according to their legends, right? Their books, Shem. Okay, and this word means name or the name. And so, and it's like, if you think about the story coming from Adam, it's like the story is Adam's job is to name everything. And it's like, so these people gain power by naming groups names, creating identities and projecting those identities into the public space for the purpose of manipulation, which breaks into two pieces. In the Babylonian tradition of magic, there was two kinds of magic users. There's the magi, who try to help good people have no bad things happen to them. So their job is good things to good people, and bad things don't happen to good people. That's the Magi's job. The Magi were the wise men of the nativity story. There are also sorcerers. Sorcerer's job is different. And this comes from David Livingstone. He lives in begins with an M, Montreal. He writes books about this, and he says the sorcerer's job is to summon demons and then control them through their superior knowledge of evil. And they demonstrate their superior knowledge by practice, because you have to practice being evil if you're going to be good at it, because you have to be good at it if you're going to control all the demons you're going to summon, because if you summon the demon and you don't control it, you're going to get chewed up. So so in dealing with this problem, that it's that people talk about the JQ or something like this, and it makes me really nervous, because it's like you mention this identity and it triggers a hysterical defensive posture among that tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just talk about name callers, because people call names in social circumstances, because that's the name I attribute to the people that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anybody else. Just people who use the names to manipulate public perceptions. And so it sanitizes it. It sanitizes the conversation, in my opinion. But there's an interesting function, which is like this. So there's one of the defensive operations I saw performed is that the Jewish population says, well, those are practicing Jews and those are not practicing Jews. And it's like the not practicing ones get to be unethical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's just a sorcerer. He's just a sorcerer. It's the same thing going on. It's just the same process. So that's the observation.
Language is spells.
Yes, it spells. And it's like, because it's just right there. It's just.
So it's testimony versus spells. Well, I mean, I think I brought this up the other night. Some common things that are is for Egyptian in Egypt, the mother gave her children, to her sons particularly, two names, and you would give the true name, right, and then you would give the public name, and you might only refer to that child as the true name in your mind or between the two of you, because that would let someone use a spell to label your. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is Saul Kripke, Saul Kripke.
Okay.
Who's sort of the end of the analytic movement. He's in my opinion, he's the end of the analytic movement's attempt. Well, what's Saul's book's title is called Naming and Necessity. And it's about naming. And I'm like, this consistency from this ancient world to the present creates a frame. And this is, hopefully I can get this profundity across without failing. But it's basically a sense of power by naming or power by words.
Yes.
Right. So it's assertive. It's controlling. It's almost motherly. It's the mirror image, the exact opposite of testimony. It's uncontrolling, unmanipulative, unsecret, right? It's empowering, not using power. It's empowering. And if you want to find two things that separate our cultures, our civilizations, and the sexes, your masculine and feminine. That's probably one of the most lovely insights that you can find is the assertion of power through language manipulation and the assertion of sovereignty through language, which is true. And that balance is freaking beautiful. So you would say, well, why have the Semites evolved religion, the Abrahamic religions, and the sophistication of lying by the Abrahamic religions? And why did Europeans develop the contractualism, reciprocity, sovereignty, truth, empiricism, and sciences? Well, it's because the presumption of what you use language for is in opposite directions.
Well, and it goes to your principle of the first institution created by the civilization governs it. And it's like, so you think about the Euphrates River valleys. These guys it's so rich of land, okay?
Yes.
So rich that the manager, who's the manager of the place, needs more guys. We need more guys to make more crops because I collect so much taxes from these guys. I need all the guys. Get them from the hills. They're different and they're strangers, and we have to mix them all together and tell them what to do and get the taxes. That's the number one job. And so, then make some story that holds them together long enough for me to collect taxes again this year, right?
Yes.
And you have a church, and that's their first one. And meanwhile, in Europe, it's like this. Curt, I want to know exactly what you knew and when you knew it. Because we're going to hurt somebody. We want to make sure we hurt the right people and none of the wrong people. And if you don't tell the truth, it's going to be you.
Yes.
You know these guys. And you grew up with them, and you're like, they're dead serious all the time.
So this is a beautiful example of metaphysical presumptions. If you start out with those differences, they're huge, right? The consequent small things in large numbers over long periods have vast consequences, right. And we may not even be aware of them. So, what is the purpose of manipulation? It's not the truth. So I say, what's the purpose of what we would call pill pull?
Concurrence. It's to cause you to agree momentarily. Until you come out of the spell.
Yes,
it's just going to last a spell.
Yes. So what does the left do? What does a mother do to her children? Because that's where it comes from. A mother casts spells on her children, right? She's not trying to tell them the truth. She's trying to regulate their behavior so that they're obedient, because that's the cheapest way for her to regulate their behavior is through seduction and spells, right? And seduction, care, feeding, and spells, right? Basically, it's all spells, right? So what does the masculine European tradition do? It's like, I need your agreement, and I need you to not kill me for having made this agreement, right? Because the child will forget tomorrow, but I will remember 10 years from now.
We're making notes.
Yeah. So this difference is really quite profound. And when people tell me, are civilizations compatible? Well, when you and I are trying to figure out what we're going to have for lunch or agree on what tastes good, that doesn't mean much, right? I mean, even if we're going to exchange and do a little deal, that becomes more abstract, because from the Europeans' standpoint, you're warrantying your words such that I won't kill you for those words. But that's not what the ethic of the bazaar is. The ethic of the bazaar is, can I get you to do this deal? And once the deal is over, that's all there is. And I'm not responsible for your folly. Right?
That's right.
No.
What made me, I reflected on during that arc was the patterns of the way the elites deal with the underclasses in the societies.
Explain that because that's important. Can I get more coffee while you explain it?
Of course.
Please explain, because that's really brilliant.
It's the domineering motherly way that the elites in the Middle East deal with the populations versus the egalitarian, no authority way we deal in the sovereign state the Western civilization arises from.
Yes.
Which is equals and responsibility versus no responsibility and high power grading of authority. So
Go ahead.
The Western civilization is the responsibility and sovereignty of people that are sovereign, that are responsible for their actions and will be held responsible for their actions by their society, versus people who are not responsible for anything besides the current situation,
Right.
and agreeing with the authorities that are telling them how to make it work so they don't get in trouble with mommy.
Right. So let's say that we live in a village with a late Neolithic, Chalcolithic village in Europe. Everybody's somewhat of a relation, right? And we had cities in Europe, right? We never study it, but there were big cities, especially in Eastern Europe at the time, the Chalcolithic. And so they just weren't made of stone, so they didn't leave behind the record. We have to go find post holes and chars to find them, and then we can eventually see the earth that they used as the enclosure to keep the animals inside of at night, right? So but anyway, so shit, I went down a rat hole there, and I got into really something interesting. Okay, so now you're living that. Now you're in a different situation. You're a tribe of shepherds, constantly moving in
Right.
terrain that isn't good. Now, when you interact with people, what's their relation?
Less.
Yeah. So, and you might interact with lots of different people. And because people are doing that, everybody's offending and taking advantage of everybody. It's not the same as when you're living in an agrarian polity where if I offend you today, you could just end me tomorrow.
I know where you sleep.
Like, right? And you don't want that grudge to build up over time, right? And so now you take it to where you have what's the region called before there's Israel?
The Levant,
The Levant. What's the
Anatolia.
no, that's Greece. There's a name for the Levant. Oh, before there was a distinction between Jews and Syrians and whatever, I can't remember. Anyway, I feel stupid for not being able to pull it up, but I'm sorry.
Philistines.
Huh?
Philistines were there. Just
Right. Well, let's just leave it at there. Anyway, there's the people in this area. Now, if you're the Jews, right, you're the people they don't like. Right? They push you off eastward into the lesser quality ground. So now what's your incentive? It's even worse, right? It's even worse than it was before because you're already being ostracized.
you have a grudge.
Right. And then who are the I'm sorry, I can't pull this together, but the Greeks that came into the region, into the Levant after the Bronze Age collapse, and they brought metal and the Jews didn't have it. I can't remember.
Okay.
Right. So they're way more powerful, which is where this hatred of white people originated, right? I mean, it's where this hatred comes from.
It's a grudge.
This grudge is old because the people with metal and the people without
And the verbal people who remember stuff.
Right, well, it's like women remember grudges, right? I mean, just think of it that way. So Jewish culture is feminine, and it remembers grudges, and it takes joy in those grudges because it gives you. This is going to be offensive. I apologize in advance, but it gives you a response. It gives you a justification of sociopathology.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that was very reasonable said. It's not offensive particularly. It's like and I did catch some flack. I posted it. Is the I call it a woe is me story, and it's a projection of your interactions with someone else, ignoring the cause that you generated,
Yes,
your misbehavior, and the retaliation is remembered and not the initial cause for the retaliation.
right. So I really like conservative Jews. Sometimes I'm like, I'd rather hang out with you than hang out with my own because they drive me fucking nuts. Right? Because it's an intellectual world, right? It's
Yeah,
an
I like
intellectual
that.
world. But what it always comes down to is differences in responsibility for the commons. So for me, so I always say it, well, you guys are great at responsibility of family, but we're better at we're great at response. I mean, if we're the best at responsibility for the commons. And so these produce two different biases, and if you can keep them within their domains, we could have the integrity of a Jewish family at the responsibility for the commons of Northern Europeans. I mean, it'd be a pretty nice world to live in. But it's very hard to have those kind of semi-conflicting dichotomies.
Well, when they're
divided loyalties.
When they're competing in the public space,
right? They're divided
because
loyalties.
it is where does the responsibility for the commons, how do you parse that out? Because that's the variable.
And it will always impact the family every single time. So you have to say, well, you have to design your family then for the inclusiveness of the traditional family, but as long as it doesn't conflict with the commons, responsibility for the commons.
Right.
And the people who've done that, of course, are the Germans have done that well. They maintain responsibility for family. That's why I've increasingly convinced if my health improves enough, I have to go live there it'll probably take me I'd say a year, but I bet I can figure it out in 6 months. I know too much. It's not like when I was just starting out and I'm like, I don't have a system. Now I have a system. I have to just figure out what it is that they do every day. How do you get a Moritz? He's as nerdy and responsible as an Anglo of my discipline, but he won't open up his shirt and open up his knuckles like we will. And whereas that I don't, and that my friend still calls it piety, right? Piety.
Yeah.
It says that's, and I know where that comes from in German culture. That's the origin of that is understandable because it's certainly in the Protestant. It's there before the Protestant ethic and afterwards. So, but I got to understand. I got to ask. It's those million questions you ask from all these different subtle angles.
Yes.
Right. It's like all these intersections, and you're just like carving off a bit of misconception.
Yes.
Time until the underlying structure.
Yeah.
That's it. And I just need to do that because I dated an Italian woman, Northern Italian woman in Munich for a while. I tell you, that was not getting in that woman's pants. That's the kind of woman you're not getting there, not happening until which has made me just love her more, right? she picked me up on a freaking airplane. Did I tell you that story? She picked me up on an airplane. I thought it was a story. She picked me up on an airplane. Weird.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay. I got you.
And anyway, I kept seeing, she was beautiful because she had both the Italian and the German going on. And it was like, I'm not sure that isn't the best. It's like that romantic stuff, but all that responsibility. It was just really fascinating to me that she had those both. So we did the beer fest and shit together. It was just there's some relationships that require more than long distance, right?
Yes.
And I had too many things going on, too many women. Anyway, so what was I trying to point out? I need to live there to really get what they're how that's working, because this whole responsibility, but they've lost the willingness, because Germans used to be the scary. They were the scary one. German mercenaries were the
kicked out of them for 100 years.
Yeah.
So they got put in their place hard, and it's like the Swedes. The Swedes have been calm for a long time, and it's like they've been waiting and watching. The way I see the Germans, and it's like you go, what's the German piety, right? It's group loyalty.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how I judge it, because it's like they recognize the value of the group, and they value the group. And that's what I think the source of it is, because there's a certain calmness. I deal with a couple Germans, and it's just
I love it. I absolutely love it, because they're fucking honest,
and they just do their thing. They just do their job, and they're competent.
What I don't like is when they go home and there's no work, which I would like if I were them. But as an American who basically, if you're an executive, it's a 24-hour day job. And that annoys me, because I have to work 24-hour day job. Why don't you? Right. But they're actually right.
Right. That's the proper balance.
They're actually right. But I don't get to act like that. I have to run
the English problem.
What?
Mad dogs and Englishmen, they say.
Yes. So, the other thing I don't like is one of the things I love about the English culture that I'm from is the humor and the self-deprecation.
Yeah.
And I really find that enjoyable. And there's the loyalty is more craftsmanly, whereas German's loyalty is more social and political. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I know what I mean, and I have to think about how to put it into words. But there's this thing of, we have definite classes in the English system, right? I mean, I'm certainly part of a class. I mean, I'm conscious of it, even though I'm an American. Because I've thought about this a lot, I'm more conscious of it. So you're deferential to people who are above you, and but the humor, the sort of humor, and the teasing, and the I fooled you, right? The trash. I mean, I just love that shit. I mean, I just think it's so ingratiating. And the Germans, it's like, are very open about having no sense of humor. It's not really true they have no sense of humor. It's just very constrained. And it gets worse as you go east. By the time you get to Ukraine, a lot of that trash talking, you get hurt, right? And trash talking in among Russians, it's all playful, like you're drunk. It's all an analogy to being drunk, right? It's not. Right? So I don't know. I just find it. That's the one thing that about Germany that I don't like, is it's not it's playful, and I enjoy the Anglo playfulness. I really find that fascinating.
Endearing, right? It's endearing.
It's endearing. Okay, so we were going on we covered this naming issue, which I thought was a brilliant subject matter. And so do we think we did that question a service? Because the whole idea of the people who name things,
Yes,
the use of words as spells,
yes,
the use of spells to obtain agreement in time rather than loyalty over time,
right.
and commons over time. In other words, it's another example of people say, I want to have you and me and Rudyard on a call sometime, because he's convinced the world is chaotic and inexplicable. And I'm like, no, it's
Not so inexplicable, and it's really orderly.
It's amazingly orderly.
And
And
like unbelievably orderly.
yeah, and
It
it's
really is like stunningly orderly.
stunningly orderly. So it's when you trace these minor you trace the evolution of a first an institutional concept, a metaphysical concept. You trace that up through its existence, and you realize, holy shit, these things are really powerful.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, really, really powerful. I mean, and they're explicable. I mean, you only get there though when you do comparative civilizations and see how they did it differently. They had a slightly different circumstance, which produced a slightly different metaphysics, which consists of a very few number of different assumptions. But that's the reason, and it's also why we can't change them, because we literally can't conceive of the world any other way.
We think of that everybody's like us is our natural bias, right? That's our natural human bias.
Yes.
And then what's interesting to me is that it's like human behavior in a social setting is like a protein. It's like this long chain, and it's getting longer, and then it folds in on itself in only 3 ways.
Yes.
What institution will it be first? Boom, or boom, or boom.
Yes.
And that tells us what's going to happen.
Yes.
It's just fascinating, but it's like because it has to do with that trifunctional nature of everything, right? Which is there's only 3 influences that can occur in our society. How do we influence other people? And it's like, okay, which one are we going to ground out on?
It's so fascinating. And it's what you were said the other night, you become aware of your own bothood.
Oh God.
I don't know,
It's like, no, it's like, I don't want to admit, I find it distressing.
Yes. Well, you used to tease me about this because I'd say it's humiliating.
Oh yeah.
And you say, oh, it's not humiliating. Now I kind of wonder, is this one of those things you sort of got there and says, yeah, it's humiliating.
It's kind of humiliating.
Yeah, okay.
I can't admit it, it's too humiliating.
Yeah. It's like, we're just bots. I'm just a bot. It's freaking annoying, right? The best you can do as a bot is try to minimize the amount of
right, you got bad programming in there.
Yeah.
Right, so you eliminate the bad programming whenever you find it.
Yes.
So you have to run this is the introspection function.
Yes.
Which is internally reflect. Yes. And criticize your own behavior as it influences the outside.
Yes.
That's the key factor of agency, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's like this: the people that don't admit they're bots are the most bot-like.
That's true. Well, that's like the second disturbing thing I've heard today.
Sorry.
No, it's just Martin said something similar earlier yesterday, but the people who are the least
introspective
are the
most bot-like.
Most bot-like.
Because they're projecting everything on everybody else. It's everybody else's fault. And this is the complaint that I have about the namers. The namers justify everything they do to justify the bot within.
Yes. All right. So because this is a great single topic video.
Yes.
I want to just stop this recording and start the next one. So for the audience, we're going to continue in a minute. So I'm gonna stop the recording now. Please,
My turn.
Brad, do your thing.
You. That button, like, subscribe, notifications, and do leave those comments.
I love you, man.